today I'm thrilled to have Glenton De Kock from SAACI with us. He's the CEO of SAACI and has a long history with the association. And today we want to explore more about you, Glenton, a little bit more, because I think as much as people know you, there might be a few things that they don't know. And also learn more about the association. And how you're supporting the industry. So welcome, firstly.
Thank you. No, thanks for having me, and thanks to the listeners and the viewers.
Yes.
Quite excited, and I'm pleased that we've got this off the ground.
Absolutely. We're thrilled that you've come on board as an affiliate partner, as an association. I think the education is key, and using this platform, another medium, because we all live such busy lives, and just being able to listen while we work is another way of us doing a little bit better, right?
Totally agree with that, 100%. I think the business is a good thing.
Yes.
In a small way. But I'm always speaking to people about watching burnout as well. So
that's true.
And we're the worst in the event industry. We're the worst to figure out that we actually are burning. We're not out yet, but then we just continue as we go along.
That is true. And the world is changing. So I'd love to hear how SAACI's view on that is. If I look at SAACI, I mean, SAACI is always involved in a multitude of things within the industry. But take us back to what is SAACI's mission? What is their role within this industry, and why the need to get involved in all these subsectors or of this ecosystem? How does it play a role in advancing the business event sector on the continent?
So as an association, 38 years in a couple of weeks' time, the association's been around, primarily to ensure professionalization within the industry, right? One of the things that we've held back on as an association is to become a regulatory industry body. Now, there's a need for that without a doubt, but I think within our industry, because of the level of skill that we have, self-regulation is quite important. So as an association, to professionalize the industry, we've looked at how best you do that from a standardized or standard process, right? And we've done a lot of work, particularly within the PCO space. Because when you speak events specifically, I always say we're not travel agents, we're agents of change. Because when you do these things, something happens there, whether it's knowledge transfer, whether it's economic transfer, but something happens at an event or at a meeting.
Yeah.
So,
and you're ultimately driving business.
You're driving business. You're ultimately driving business. And a lot of what we ensure from ourselves as an association is that we look at how best do we grow the industry. And that's about sort of for us right now is how do we grow the rest of Africa, and importantly within South Africa, how do we grow the rest of our provinces outside of the mainstream provinces in terms of putting events into those and ensuring that besides having a venue, are there sufficient suppliers.
Yes.
Sometimes we take in, if we're doing this regional spread, you must also then at times bring in infrastructure or bring in an experienced person as well. Yep. So at a growth level, ours is really threefold. One, growing of the industry, growing of our member companies, so that the more events that take place in our destination, the more companies can come on board. And obviously the individual growth in terms of the individual themselves as well. And that's a lot of work that we've done in the last year around the individual growth at a learning level. So at a national level with our South African National Department of Tourism, the key there is, what does professionalization look like for the industry? So because we've done a lot of work 2013 until 2017, where we did a comprehensive research around the PCO, the accreditation process, how to accredit a PCO, all of that information sits on a server. Ours is activation of that.
Okay.
And the beauty of that is a lot of what we see happening within Africa, we have been able to consider how best we're going to work with partners in Africa. And that's why the association at a growth level also has collaboration as one of its cornerstones. Now,
yes.
You and I both know that collaboration is an easy word spoken, but it's quite difficult to figure out who does what where now.
Yeah.
And the partnerships is one that it's a partner that wants to do something, not a partner that says, I'm here to collaborate, but I don't do anything at the end of the day. So for us,
the one-sided
sort of thing. So at a collaborative level, particularly for ourselves as an association, what we have done in the last probably 24 to 36 months is, if we've been around for as long as we have, as I said, 37 plus years, how are we going to then ensure that on the continent of Africa, like-minded associations are brought to the fore?
Yes.
Right? Because you and I both know our experience during COVID was we were able to work together in a collaborative manner because we all had the same objective to get back to business, right? I think my frustration with ourselves as individuals and as a collective is now we're back to business. We still have the same issues. We still have issues around professionalization. We still have issues around pressure of costing. We have issues of space utilization. We have issues around lack of skill in some parts of it. So there is still a need for us to be really more open and almost deliberate around how do we collaborate. You know, and I think I've shared with you my thoughts around maybe if we don't do an SA Events Council as an example, let's do an SA Alliance. So at least we pool our resources. That says this is where SAACI is good at, this is where AAXO is good at, this is where EXSA is good at. So we figure out how best we bring those together to deliver for our members. Because the missed opportunity here is, which is the third sort of area of the association from a SAACI perspective, is if we don't learn what we know, we're not going to be able to learn in the future. You know, so the repetition of the learning side of things, and there is a bit of global pressure to ensure that there's uniformity around learning.
Yes,
there is. There's no doubt about it, right? And I've always been clear that Africa needs to do it for itself. So, as I said, with our PCO accreditation process, there's a range of information available. Somebody else doesn't need to duplicate that, right? If we need to sell some of that off, we need to sell that off. But there's data. It's there, right? What we must be clear about is that the next generation of skilled individuals is going to say, when I'm learning, when I'm sitting in the classroom, how relevant is this to my industry where I'm sitting right now? And by the way, is this recognized globally as well? And I think you and I are very clear that whatever we do at a learning level has to be aligned globally. So we've done a lot of work. It's tomorrow afternoon, the students from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology through MPI starts the third year or the third cohort of their bootcamp.
Wonderful.
And we've done that from an investment side with CPUT as an association to say that if we're going to grow, if we're going to collaborate, where do we find the best learning to do just that? And how do we bring that into our ecosystem? And that's what the work that we've done as an association with the University of Johannesburg that I was with earlier this morning, Nelson Mandela University, UNISA, as well as CPUTs, when they're offering tourism management and they've got chapters or they've got modules that are just around eventing, how best do we get our expertise and our skilled people as guest lecturers there to ensure that the curriculum matches what industry wants as well.
Completely.
So as an association, we've been always clear on what our framework is in terms of the growth, the learning and collaboration. The implementation of that is important.
Yes.
That's vitally important because besides looking at the professionalization, it's also about standards as well. And we need to ensure that from a South African perspective and an African perspective that we don't parachute standards in from Europe or the US.
Yes.
Because some of those are very rigid, right? And some of them you look at and say, well, in Africa, a good example would have been last week with the a group called the Chiefs Tented Experience, where they literally built a mini tented city in a King Reserve. So they've got a client got 200 delegates. They're looking for an African experience for a meeting, a very serious meeting, top end JSE listed company, 200 delegates. But they don't want the norm. They don't want to go into a venue, but they want the venue. So they've been trying to get me to come and look at the product and what they've supplied there. And you look at it, you say, well, this is Africa.
Wow.
Now, glamping is not for everybody.
No.
Let me put it that way. Glamping is not for everybody.
Especially if the lions are just outside.
Well, exactly. So you get woken up by the lions, you get woken up by the elephant or the cheetah. But it's an experience that for 2 days or 3 days is well worth it. So, all of the comments coming back is when next. So
wow.
They literally...
Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Look at, I don't envy them because it takes them something like 3 months to build the city with infrastructure. So water, electricity, everything, warm water as well. So yeah, realistically, there's those opportunities that exist as well, right? In saying that from a standardization is, so how do you grade that, for instance, whether it's 5, 4, 3 or 2 stars? We need to determine that from Africa perspective. Yes. Anybody from Europe will go, love you Africa, but I'm not going to stay in that tent. That could be a 2-star experience. Yet the food is 7-star. I mean, the AV that the guys put on there, the windbreakers, if there's going to be any wind, everything that you would have in a normal city,
Yeah.
in terms of an
With
city
four
slicker.
walls.
With 4 walls, you just got in a tented campus.
Yes.
You know, so we're quite clear that Africa needs to drive what Africa can deliver. And for that reason, we need to ensure that our standards is accepted. Now, the only way we're going to get that right is, and that's what part of what we've done as an association is, if you work with the Events Industry Council, American-based, or the Joint Meetings Industry Council, which is the European-based,
Yes.
we've got membership of those associations.
Right.
And then we're one of the few in Africa from an association side that has that. So when they talk about sustainability, or they talk about standards, or they talk about learning, our voice is heard. So that helps at an industry level to know that you're not working in a vacuum.
Yes.
There's at least some connectivity
To the rest of the world and the continent.
and the continent in that regard, because that drives issues around thought leadership, leading the sort of industry where it has to go, and that's what we've been doing for a number of years in association, and also providing insights as to where industry is at the moment, because many a time we think we know where industry is because it feels like good and everybody's busy, but you don't necessarily fully appreciate where we are at this particular moment and what's coming down the line as well.
Now, talking about where we are at this particular moment, do you think it's been an easy pickup post-pandemic? Are we gone back to 2019 and we're just picking up from there? Is there a vacuum, a void that we just avoiding? Has it been an easy pickup for this industry?
So if you were with us last week in Cape Town, so we had a joint association member meeting session called Jams in Cape Town. If you were part of that conversation and you look at the presentations and we curated that in terms of the speaker panels and focusing specifically on the business or meetings and events industry, it did look as if we just arrived there, right? And I'm always mindful to tell everybody that we in September of 2024, just roll back to September of 2022, where we just that come out of in South Africa terms regulations, right? So it looks like we're doing well. It feels like we're doing well because everybody's busy as such.
Yes.
But we must not forget that the challenges we had before 2019 is still there at the moment. It is still there, right? And in answering that is, we've been asking our members to consider how would you want to see the next 2 years look, right? Because you realistically got 18, maybe some people say, well, no, we had 2 good years. So we are busy. We might not have made all our money back. We've employed more people, but it doesn't sort of like coat over the fact that there's still issues to be dealt with.
And what are those issues? So what are the prominent ones that you think that need to be fixed?
So ours is the coordination around space utilization from a South African perspective.
Right.
In addition to that is, and I'm on the record, I think it's April of 2020 that there was a question asked about cost and are we going to price ourselves out of the market? So
yes.
I'm on the record by saying that I still have that concern that we should not be pricing ourselves out of the marketplace. So, and you can do this by a simple Google Map search in some of our big cities in respect to accommodation rates.
Ah, okay.
So you can
Yes,
see that
that's right.
shift around when an event is going to take place. And in some instances, like 400+% increase. And then you can see the same with airlines as well. So our suppliers that get our people to these events, that cost has crept to an extent where it looks like it's costly right now. Right? And I think we must be honest about the fact that we need to drive them back or call a timeout, because for future events, we are going to have space, but it's going to be too costly to deliver the event. Right?
Of course.
And in saying that, what we've also seen, because of that cost, events that would have probably pulled 1,500 people can only pull 1,000 people now. Or there's a drop-off. Or people are going, it's a bit costly to get to the event. Even at a regional level, send me meetings over Zoom link, for instance. So there's a bit of that at the back end that still exists there. So while we are doing fairly well in delivering some really cool events, my concern is that at a cost level, events that are still considering destinations might not necessarily come because of cost. And cost across the supply chain, even food costs, food and beverage costs, those are things that we need to, I think, we're asking our members and we're pushing within the ecosystem that just have a conversation around cost, push that back. And because as an association we deliver our annual congress, it means that myself as the CEO has to speak to event organizers who are members, or to a food and beverage company that's a member and say, listen, I think that cost is too high. Or I think the setup cost for your venue, why am I paying it over day 1 and day 2 and day 3?
Yeah, because ultimately, I mean, those events will cease to exist, right?
Yeah,
because there'll be the slow decline
in cost. Yeah.
And decline in attendance.
Yeah,
and we need the bums and seats.
Yeah.
Right?
So ours is to say that we were seeing some of that before 2019. We were able to go almost like go down and then up in terms of the bell curve, and then say, well, what is it that we need to keep an eye on? For me, it's costs at the moment in terms of how we're delivering. And costs, as I said, bringing people here, hosting them here, feeding them here, and delicate costing as well.
Yeah.
Right? Because ultimately what you want is you want people to stay longer. And if there are less than people, delegates coming because of cost, it means that everybody will fly in the night before the event and fly back immediately after the event itself, which means that at a leisure level becomes a bit of a challenge. And then airlines are going to go, but you guys, your carrying capacity is not necessarily where it should be as well. So while we see more airlines sort of activating their routes back into Africa, and particularly back in South Africa, we keep an eye on what that cost is going to look like going forward as well. And yes, the cost of living for all of us has gone up. But when you're building and driving and maintaining and sustaining and wanting to create new markets for yourself, cost is always going to be a thing there, right? And we've got as a destination from Africa perspective, we have to keep an eye on what's happening within Asia, and particularly what's happening in the UAE as well. Because there's about competing with ourselves and pulling business there, because they could potentially drive their cost down in some parts of it. But it's expensive. It still remains expensive.
It is.
And for that reason, when I speak the way I am, I'm speaking it from a delivery point of view, from an event organizer or PCO or venue organizer. But in some parts of the industry, whether you're in finance, pharmaceutical, or banking, in terms of the other areas, they might not be totally cost sensitive at all. Mining would be one of those as well.
Completely,
so
yeah.
The pushback I normally get to say, well, it's not an actual tourism or business event that we're hosting. We're actually only hosting a mining in Durban as an example. So at an executive level, I mean, that's where you need to be clear when I'm talking about cost is we need to manage that cost so that a mining in Durban or a financial institution says, listen, you are actually expensive now. Because the moment they start saying that,
it helps everybody.
It helps everybody as well. Yeah.
Are there areas in Southern Africa that you think are showing like really strong growth or innovation when it comes to hosting events and conferences?
The most obvious one would be Rwanda, Kigali. And I think they've been very clear around, as when I speak about them, is that this is about a destination. And they have done what I said earlier at the start of our conversation. They looked at their destination and said, listen, we can do a bit of leisure, but if we do a country sort of brand and a country push, the meetings and events will get us there. Right? I mean, the NBA Africa Basketball League, for instance, is one of those where, it's a 5-year agreement in a particular marketplace. I know there's a lot of talk about, who they're supporting in terms of their sport logo, whether it's Arsenal and those type of things. But it's place marketing that creates awareness for travelers who necessarily would not have come there. And I always use an example from a South African perspective in that if you are an investor and our president hosts an annual investment conference, so whether you're from these big investment companies, you necessarily might not have thought of coming to South Africa or Africa, right? But because there's a good project there and it speaks to you, it brings you here. Right. And Rwanda's been very good at that, in that they, at a donor funding level, they've gone for some seriously big, with the UN-funded World Travel and Tourism Council. So they've gone for these signature events, which has allowed everybody to get that awareness lifted. And okay, now we see Rwanda. I think their next is how do they build a tourism leisure angle from their destination. But they've got sufficient people that when you go, if I'm not going to South Africa, or Cape Town or Durban or Johannesburg, I'm going to go Kigali, Rwanda. So they've got their cool challenge is they can get people there. I've been saying to them, so how can you spread people around your country?
Yes. Because
there within lies their next growth opportunity for themselves. And the same would go for Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda.
Nice.
Because all of them have recognized that if we're able to have and host an exhibition or a meeting,
Yes.
that drives eyeballs onto our sites. And then eventually people are going to go, if I'm going to Uganda, what can I do?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of how you can build a destination into a leisure one, that business events just keep you moving the whole time. So pre and post tours are something that really works for those destinations going forward.
Sure.
And that's obviously Nigeria remains a huge competitor because of its business there. And then obviously the countries that are in Africa but closer to Europe, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt.
Of course.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of times I always say to our colleagues in Africa, don't forget that we actually have got like a north part of Africa. So there's a missed opportunity there in which the south and the north needs to work together, because it means that the middle part of Africa, the central part of Africa, or even spots of the east and west of Africa could benefit from the top and the bottom of Africa working in respect of driving more feet into those destinations as well.
Absolutely.
And that's where we need to almost like build a three-prong approach in saying that if we get that right in terms of north and south, we'll be able to get the airlines to push people, horizontally and vertically into our destination instead of going out of Africa and back into Africa as well.
Because there's so many opportunities there. Yeah. Now, in terms of SAACI as initiatives going forward, what does the event industry, what do you have in store for the event industry? What are the initiatives that we can look forward to with regards to supporting the industry?
So ours is to drive the acceptance of digitization, accepting that we're going to do far more on our mobiles and on platforms. And that's purely around communication and marketing. Okay. The live event still is there. In-person event is still just that. And we've invested quite a lot of money in sort of back-end systems and ensuring that we manage our data and how we're going to use data going forward. Mm-hmm. What we need to consider, and that's sort of the next element, as to how do we replicate associations on the continent. Yes. So not have another SAACI in Uganda or Kigali or out in Ethiopia, but how do you have private sector? Because private sector plays an important role in respect of how we deliver the eventing going forward. So we've been working quite a lot with companies, members past and present, that have been on the continent to figure out how can we establish these associations on the continent, so that they're driven by the people on the ground, private sector, because association space remains fundamentally important. Not many people subscribe to associations, but one must understand that when you're dealing on policy issues with government as a starting base, government's going to go, so who do you represent? And if you're not represented by the right people at the table, all that happens is a policy gets implemented. Mm-hmm. And the same when you're dealing with how best do you then drive a bid process, for instance. The more collectiveness there is amongst ourselves as private sector, the easier I think it becomes for us to understand that if I need to speak to somebody in Kigali, who are those people to speak to? At the moment right now, they know from a South African perspective, it's either AAXO, EXSA, SAACI, ASATA, FEDASA, or SAACI. So we've done fairly well in terms of our private sector association. So we've been driving that very silently to ensure that we start establishing and helping associations in Africa itself.
That's great.
Because for that reason, you can then now consider what the future looks like in respect of, and I say this to South African tourism, Meetings Africa happens in February. But Meetings Africa needs to also happen in Africa. So whether that's Cairo, whether that's Kigali, whether that's in Tunisia, we have to have, so almost my sort of future would be Meetings Africa, February, Southern Africa or parts of Africa, and then we end off in October, November, Meetings Africa, wherever. In Africa, in North Africa, because that then brings us to the state where, if you look at how the rest of the world is set up in respect of trade engagements, you've got IMEX Frankfurt and IMEX America. Mm-hmm. You've got ITB Barcelona, and those are signature events with WTM that happens in London and the meeting show. We need to have those types of shows, because not all of our suppliers are at the stage where they're wanting to do these experiences on these platforms. But if we work with an ITV or we work with an IMEX and we work with the joint meetings in this council or the events, we are able to bring those organizers into our spaces, and more of our suppliers can get involved. So it's about the connectivity with the buyer, and that's where we at from a SAACI perspective, and that's why the digitization is such an important one, and that we can drive the communication, drive the marketing, create the ecosystems across the continent on platforms, because it's easier to connect while we're all busy doing and delivering what we have to do, versus the fact that when you're sitting at a trade exhibition, it's 2-3 days out of your life, excluding the travel time. So it's literally 5 days out of that. So we've looked at how best we're able to work with those institutions, including ICA as well, International Congress and Convention Association, because as I always say to somebody that's not in the industry, they're the association of associations. So they do in excess of between 30 and 100,000 meetings a year in terms of the associations they have. We all know Africa only does 3% of that. So just think about Africa, when you're doing 5% of those, you need venue, suppliers, and you need the community involvement in doing all that. So that's where we at from a SAACI perspective as to how best we drive continent, but understand that we're still South African based or Southern African based, and we must take care of our members in doing that. So ours is, how do we build this platform so that our members can see where the opportunity is within Africa as well?
Yes, because ultimately you want these businesses to thrive within this ecosystem, right? Now, when we look at these businesses and surviving, a big part of it is that continuous learning and professional development, right? How much are you seeing of that within the industry as it stands, within the professionals that are working within the industry, and how much of space are we making for young professionals within that industry to grow?
So let me start with the professionals in the industry as we are right now. Many of us don't have the time. So you know that you must do professional development, but you don't have the time. And as I said earlier in the conversation around working with the National Department of Tourism, around the professionalization of the industry needs your big employers, whether they're the hotel groups or the convention centers or the educational institutions, or even within your sort of financial sectors, where and I look at some of the media companies, they have in-house event organizers or event planners to that extent. Right? You need those to agree to what the career path looks like, because providing a lot of learning, whether it's recognition of prior learning, and that, if I'm a big hotel group and I don't recognize that particular certification, as a staff member, how do I move to the next hotel group who also doesn't recognize that as well? So
how do we fix that?
We fix that by ensuring that as from an association side, as I mentioned earlier, how do you work with institutions that are pushing out the next generation to ensure that their learning matches what industry want? And then you must use those same institutions to say, listen, when you're doing your MBAs or you're doing your PGDPs and all of these fancy things, there's an event professional that requires the foreign learning and recognition as well. So that's why it's re-engineering what the education system has been providing, but more on with a clearer focus that we're quite labor intensive, and we're quite intensive in terms of actually physically doing stuff. You know, so if you studied a BCom tourism and you must deliver Meetings Africa, the budget is done, but you're going to have to deliver it on the floor. So I need
to make it work within the budget.
Within the budget in that regard. And if you look at with regard to the skill sets, the eventing side is quite unique, but simplistic in a way of how you can deliver an event. Right? But if you look at everything else we've just been speaking about right now in terms of digitization, marketing, communication, budgets, graphic design, raising people's interest to click on your website, or actually then also a delegate posting as well. It's not always a pure event skill as such. Right? And within that, the recognition of prior learning, potential future learning, industry needs to inform that curriculum extensively, like really extensively. And part of me is always challenging education institutions, because if you're doing tourism, hospitality, and particularly doing event management, and you've only attended one event in a calendar year, but you're lecturing every day, that is a problem. That is a serious problem in that regard. And that's why the importance for ourselves as an association to frankly have a conversation and share what I've been sharing right now, but find that solution in saying that in parts there's no need for us to deliver or develop content. It's how we are narrating the content to make it relevant for a skilled professional who's got 25 years worth of experience, but is able to do learning in their own time.
Yes.
Right?
Now, SAACI has, you're involved in so many initiatives, you're supporting the industry, but we can't only rely on SAACI, right?
Yeah.
Members need to take initiative as well and to take the baton forward. Now, how do you think, what are some of the recommendations you believe that your members can do? Because you can give them everything, you can hand it to them, but what next? So what are some of the practical things do you think that your members could implement within their organizations to take the industry forward?
Look, I'll start by saying that you almost have to journalize this thing, in that a lot of what you've learned on the job. Some of us have got formal learning, that's quite good. But if you're looking at the future, and it's a succession plan that is based on a journal, right? And many of us that are bringing the next generation in, your first intent, as I said, I got employed by a guy in a shorts and sloughs, so I'm not going to be that guy.
Yes.
But I can recognize when I see somebody that has got lots of potential, but needs a lot of time. And I'm always saying to members or professionals in the industry, remember that all of us just didn't arrive as somebody helped us and pulled us along. Good or bad. Sometimes you were chastised and you go like, what is the old person talking about? You know that old person. So on that juncture, I'm saying if you're listening to this, you must say, well, in my business, this is what I can do.
Yeah.
I'm good at this. Whether I'm good at graphic designing, whether I'm good at working with the community, and make that your sort of core of your business. Because in that way, you are going to bring more people in the industry. Trying to almost frame yourself like everybody else in that regard doesn't help you. And all you do is, most people say, Glenton, this is a lot of work. Well, all of us was trained by somebody. There are few that were able to, even if you had been given the gift from above and said, listen, I've got this thing sorted. You had a mentor that you'd went to. You had colleagues that you had spoken to as well. So on that basis, we almost have to ensure that we don't put too many pressure on ourselves in our businesses, because as I said earlier, we're literally 2 years out of pandemic.
Yep.
Right? And many of us are there, some of us are not there. Some of us know that we need more staff, but not going to take staff on. So there's a lot of risk decisions that we have to consider going forward as well. But if you're good at one thing in a particular sector, drive it through that particular thing. So as I said, whether, I look at the guys who work in your particular space in terms of stand builders, for instance. If you're good at the stand build the stand. Right? We're quite good at advocacy. We're quite good at connecting and building and bringing people together at collaboration level. So that's where we're going to continue working quite extensively and bring somebody in that can help us with communication and comms.
Yes. Bring in the right people.
Bring in the right people, find the right students. And that's an area where we, at times, because of us pushing and driving targets the whole time, we almost get tired when we think about, okay, so how do I bring the next generation in? And you go like, no, okay, I'll wait for it next year. We just push it down the line for 6 months. And what happens is you unfortunately, for many of us around the world, we're creating a pool of learned individuals without practical experience. And what we've done is we've integrated some of the other associations' calendars as well. From the 1st of September this year until the end of December, we've got about 55 to 60 events happening in our country across the board, right? Now, that's just us pulling that off the internet in terms of what's available. Imagine if we speak to each of our members individually, say, please give us your calendar. Just give me the dates and the event name. That means there's more employment opportunities for students to learn on the job.
Yes.
Right. What we need to, my final sort of point on that is, we really need to get a group of volunteers that are willing to provide time to say, if we're going to bring students or we're going to bring skilled professionals into our space, these are the 5 things they need to know. Absolutely. Whether it's etiquette, dress etiquette, whether it's how you need to figure out how to work. Time is one thing that I always come across. And working long hours is not for everybody. Working back-to-back events is not for everybody. So, imagine a poor student at the moment in their 3rd or their 4th year, and I'm saying to them, come and work with me at SAACI, but we're working on 7 things before the end of the calendar year. Your mind is going to go like, when are we going to stop working? Because you've gone, as I shared with you, you've gone from starting in Limpopo, finishing Cape Town, sitting here, off to the next event. and it's not for everybody. So those are little things where I'm always trying to say that we need to have an industry induction program where all of us are allowed, and I'm asking all the universities, as well as any private institution, allow the industry individuals to come at the start of the year. Whether it's
not
first,
at the end of the year.
Not at the end of the year. Come first. If it's the first
true.
year, take it in cohort as part induction, second year. So before class starts, just have a social networking. So listen, thanks for studying this particular industry. It's quite cool. These are the opportunities available. This is what's going to come in the year. Yes. So by the time you get there as a student, we've already told you how cool our industry is, but you're ready to work.
But I think what it all boils down to is that initiative from the members themselves. We can have associations that drive the agenda, that drive the narrative, make these facilities available, make these initiatives available to us. But as event organizers, it sits with us to be able to take it to the next level, to be able to bring in the people, implement these activities so that we can build business and can drive business, you know. In parting, I know there's so much to chat about with you. There's always so much to chat about with you, we will have you back. But in parting, what is some of your advice that you would give to the industry as we build back going forward?
Look, I think for me, I've been saying this and everybody's been laughing at me, but I think we must be travel fit as an industry. You know, and I say that with kindness to all of us because we constantly are moving the whole time. You know, so your body, both physically and mentally, and all of the other pressures, you have to go take that with you. And obviously, the second is around being meeting fit, because we sit in meetings 24/7. Whether you're sitting behind the mic or the screen at the moment, you're in a meeting. And then there's other parts of being fit as well, which is really take care of your family and yourself and everything else that goes in your personal life. But I think for South Africa, particularly for Africa, taking those three things into account sets us up for the next 3 to 5 years. Because as we look at issues around sustainability, socioeconomic impacts, the ESG things, those are fundamentally important. What we don't necessarily must lose sight of the fact is that we have a destination that everybody wants to come to. We must figure out how do we speak to those people. Because they are there. They're sitting. Some of them are sitting as executive assistants, secretaries, PAs that are looking to take an event into Africa. We must work together. We must work together in that almost it becomes a communication chain where if I can't do it in South Africa, I must go and do it in Ethiopia. Because that is an area that I believe when we get it right, Africa flourishes.
Absolutely. So it's about building those relationships, right?
100%. Because in doing that, you start seeing more and more opportunities to bring people in. And there are many a supplier. And I always use the farmer as an example. There's a farmer that's growing carrots or potatoes that's going to need our industry. Right? They're going to need our industry. So while we always focus on what we know, we must always understand that we make things happen for other sectors of the economy.
That is true.
And if we don't measure what we do in terms of the data, all that happens is we're seen as those happy-go-lucky people because we always seem to be having fun.
Having a party.
Exactly. Yet when you look at the things that we deliver, we're delivering in other parts of the economy as well. And we need those clients, we need those government institutions to speak about the importance of a meeting, an event, an exhibition, including the centers as well, because we don't need to sell aggressively. We need to convert aggressively because people know where we are. People know what we have to offer, but sometimes our conversion fails us for something in the supply chain. Absolutely. Whether that's cost or people or time or access to venues, that's quite important because, I mean, the base of a meeting is, as we said for many years, a meeting will always take place. A holiday is something that you plan. But a meeting happens, and some meetings happen quicker than others.
That's true.
Right? So on that juncture, I think Africa's got an opportunity to know that meetings will always happen. Our sort of appeal as an association and myself as the CEO for SAACI is to say, can we have more and more of these meetings far more regularly, and can we start sharing opportunities that we wouldn't necessarily turn around because we can't host a meeting. I would never want to I never want to turn somebody away when they say, I really want to come to Africa, mine is, if you can't come to South Africa, where else can I put
Absolutely.
you in place? 100%.
Well, Glenton, absolutely interesting discussion with you. There is so many takeaways, I think, for everybody. And bringing it back down to the basics, in terms of the simple meeting and how effective that can be across industries. I think, again, going back to the people development and the professional development and how we affect so many different sectors. This ecosystem is quite a big one. And it always needs the support. And we're so grateful that we have the support of SAACI, an association that's been with us for so many years, and a CEO that has been instrumental in leading so many key discussions that we haven't had in many years as well. So we're really grateful. Thank you so much for your support.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated. I look forward to the next conversation.
Absolutely. There's definitely going to be a next one. There's so much to learn. There's always something new. And we're so glad that you're driving the agenda for this industry, allowing us to bring more people into our events, driving tourism as a whole. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Whether you're an event organizer, exhibitor, event supplier, or simply passionate about the power of live events, this is the place to be, as you can see. Together, we'll continue to explore the challenges and successes and innovations shaping the future of African events. So if you're ready to connect, learn, and be inspired by the best in the business, let's get started. This is Africa Event Connect, your gateway to all things exhibitions and events on the continent. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media to stay updated on upcoming episodes and special guests. Thank you for tuning in, and here's to creating magic one event at a time.